Carolina didn't play very well in this game. I thought the second 10 minutes of the first half and the first 10 minutes of the second half, some of the poorest basketball Carolina's played in a while. Some of that is they just didn't shoot very well. We talked to Harrison Ingram about that a little bit. But he and Cormac Ryan were combined 6 of 28 from the field, and they were 5 of 17 from 3. Those numbers aren't very good. And both those guys have shot at a better clip than that. The Heels are going to have a hard time beating teams when those two guys shoot like that, and Armando Bacot only has 9 points and isn't a huge factor, and Elliot Kado fouls out playing just 8 minutes in the second half because of very aggressive whistle against him. And it was a very clear plan of Georgia Tech to try and foul him out. And if you look at the plus minus, which again isn't the end all be all stat, but it's like what was your team when you were on the floor relative to the score? Kado was plus 12 when he was out there. And in a game that you lost, that's a big number. And so Georgia Tech very clearly wanted to foul him out. I didn't even think Georgia Tech did anything special to win the game. And I'm not taking anything away from them. They were able to get back in it after the Tar Heels had an 11-point lead because Carolina couldn't score. The last nearly 6 minutes of the first half, Carolina didn't have a field goal. And I didn't think they were getting terrible looks. They just weren't getting anything to go in. And the Tar Heels shot really poorly at the free throw line. It was just one of those games, Adam, where not much went right. And yet, the Tar Heels had the ball with a chance to win at the end. And so, and I said this on postgame, I think two things, as I've said many times on here, and you and I have talked about before, two things can be true. Carolina didn't play well enough to win this game in total. Yet they fought hard enough. They did enough things to have a chance to win. And I think they should have been on the free throw line on that final play. That wasn't the reason they lost. They did plenty of other things negatively that helped them be in that position against a team they're better than. But I do think R.J. Davis should have been at the free throw line. I think the foul was on the floor. I think he should have had a 1-and-1. But I'll take R.J. Davis at the line for a 1-and-1 with like 1 second left to win the game. And so you leave me personally. You're obviously frustrated for the Tar Heels that they lost the game. It doesn't in any way change my opinion on who the Tar Heels are.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, to have done as many things badly as Carolina did on Tuesday night and still have the ball with a chance to win says something about this year's team. I mean, I'm not sure that anybody really got on the bus feeling like they were great other than maybe R.J. Davis and Jalen Washington.
Yeah.
I thought Jalen Washington was really good off the bench at a time the Tar Heels needed it. It's a little concerning that for the second straight game, it felt like about halfway through the first half, Carolina was right on the verge of knocking out the opponent and sort of making them give up and couldn't quite do it. They had that moment at Florida State and missed a couple layups, and then the Seminoles got right back in it. And, I mean, they clearly looked like the better team in the opening part of this game. But then it was like they decided they were the better team, and Georgia Tech kept playing. And Georgia Tech went 12 deep, playing without their best or one of their best players.
Yeah, by Youngo.
And credit to all those guys who came in, who pretty much all of whom did something to help them win. The Georgia Tech guards were really good.
I mean, Kyle Sturdivant was 4 of 4 from three-point range, including banking one in, which is unusual for him. I mean, I do think a lot of it was just one of those nights that happens where Georgia Tech played above its head. And again, that is not taking anything away from Georgia Tech. I think they've got some good young talent, and I think they'll be good more consistently in the future. They hit some difficult shots down the stretch in particular. Their last two shots were very low percentage shots that both went in. And it was one of those nights where they had, I mean, again, Kyle Sturdivant was 4 for 4 from three-point range. I don't think he missed one shot in the second half, and I'm not sure any of his shots other than the miss touched a rim. It was either that one bank in or just a straight swish, which sometimes that happens. Guys get hot. The free throws, I mean, again, Carolina's better than 9 of 17 from the free throw line. It was one of those nights. And I don't try to dismiss it as saying, like, oh, this loss doesn't count, because of course it counts. And it's damaging in the ACC standings. But I don't feel like Carolina is somehow fundamentally flawed after this game. Other than I do think Armando Bacot needs to be more effective for the Tar Heels.
And the Tar Heels need one other player other than R.J. Davis to make some shots consistently.
Yes.
But all these things being wrong, they still scored 73.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen prior teams score 53 on nights like this. So I like the way Georgia Tech plays. I can't say that I had watched them very much prior to Tuesday night, but they play hard and they don't run their mouth. And Damon Stoudemire seems like he is probably a good coach because he figured out that Carolina was having trouble stopping the pick and roll. And so he just kept putting Armando Bacot in that pick and roll, and the guards just kept going to work, and it worked, and they won. I think Hubert Davis has a lot of respect for Damon Stoudemire. They have a chance to be something under him, I think.
Eventually, yes. I mean, they're not there yet, but they've got some nice young pieces.
Right. So, as you said, the Tar Heels weren't going to go 20-0 in the ACC, and this game is an example of why that is, because sometimes nights like this occur.
I do think one thing that we are learning about Carolina, and this is not a secret, is how important it is for them to have Kado on the floor. Both in hit, and I feel in one way kind of like Kendall Marshall's importance to the 2011 and then 2012 teams, that he is somebody who is willing to distribute, to help set other guys up. He can score on his own, of course, and we've seen him do a great job getting to the rim, especially more here recently, and getting to the free throw line in that Florida State game, for example. But equally as important is it allows R.J. Davis to play off the ball, which, Adam, I think that version of R.J. Davis, and that doesn't mean that when they're out there together, R.J. isn't going to sometimes bring the ball up because we know that he will. But he's just better when it allows him to be the All-America version of R.J. Davis that we've seen all season long. Now, he still almost individually willed Carolina to a win here on Tuesday night. But I just think Kado being out there makes, in particular, R.J. Davis the availability to be the best version of himself. And then it just makes the team better. And so that means Kado's got to stop fouling. Now, do I think he got some really tough calls? I do. I think he got some really tough whistles in that game. But that's the third time he's fouled out this year, and we've seen him be in some level of hot water foul-wise relatively consistently. So that's got to get cleaned up because he's too important to be sitting on the bench.
Yes, and it feels like if we went back and looked at all his fouls over the course of this season, which would take a long time, a lot of them have to do with his hands, it seems like. Like he just can't get his hands off of the guy he's guarding, which even if there's minimal contact, some officials are going to call some of the time. Now, you might hip check someone, and that might not be a foul. But the hands is something that you're just taught to look for, and you see it. And I also think he's got to stop acting like every time he's called for a foul, it's not a foul. Because I do think officials remember that and kind of make a mental note that, oh, this guy complains all the time. So if he says he didn't foul, I don't believe him. And you're a freshman. So, and again, as Jones said, I do think some of the fouls that were called on him Tuesday night were not called at other points of that game and wouldn't have been called against other players. But for whatever reason, as you said, he's fouled out 3 times. This isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
And even some games when he hasn't fouled out, there have been foul issues.
Where he's had to miss time because of fouls.
And Carolina's not the best version of itself when he's on the bench. He makes the ball move. And he's brought the pitch ahead back to Carolina basketball, which gets better, easier shots. And the ball just moves differently when he's in. And now that he's added this dynamic scoring component, it makes him so much more dangerous. But they're not as dangerous when he's sitting there on the bench next to Coach Marcus.
Yeah.
So I'm fully on board with the fact that he got some bad whistles, but I'm even more fully on board with you control your defensive approach. And if there is absolutely no question that for February, March, and hopefully April, every single team's going to have one of the first couple lines on the scouting report go right at him and see if he'll commit some fouls.
Mm-hmm.
He's almost reached the status of a big guy where you want to try to get him in foul trouble by going hard at him. And, I mean, this is the ACC. There are guards who are going to drive to the basket. You think Jeremy Roach isn't going to try to drive to the basket? So you've got to figure out a way to handle that without fouling. Do the Tar Heels, when he gets in foul trouble, do they need to try his own every now and then just to remove the temptation? I don't know. I mean, I think it's something that you've got to at least think about. He's that important. You have to have him available.
Yeah. And I thought, actually, I mean, Seth Trimble did not shoot well in this game, and he missed some free throws, which, I mean, he wasn't the only one. He was 2 of 5. He had some big baskets, so I thought he was active. So, I mean, we know that Carolina has personnel, and that isn't the discussion. I mean, Carolina needs Seth Trimble to play a large role, and he has and will continue to do so. I just think Kado makes the Tar Heels different somehow.
Well, Trimble's role isn't Kado's role.
Yeah, they're different
Trimble's
roles.
role is Trimble's role.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And when he makes the drive to the basket and scores and gets fouled, that's a plus to what he's already giving you, which is incredible defense and just some toughness.
Yeah.
Kado, the defense at this point is the plus, and right now it's not a plus.
Adam, anything else? Tar Heels had 22 offensive rebounds and 23 second chance points. I mean, it was just one of these games where, I mean, just the ball just wouldn't go in. I mean, Adam was there with Pete and me and was handing stats, and I can't remember what it was, Adam, but at one point it had been like 10 minutes, and Carolina on one time had scored on the first shot of a possession during that stretch of 10 minutes of game time or something. That's crazy.
Well, and too many turnovers in the first half.
Yeah, and just sloppy turnovers.
Yeah, and similar to Florida State in that way, which I'm guessing will be hammered home this week in practice. Like, this is a tough stretch coming up.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, well, yeah. So, I mean, you look at now, you're halfway through ACC play. You're 9-1, and that's great. I mean, we know Carolina's played well. But back half, you got 10 more games in conference action. 2 against Duke, 2 against Miami. You're at Virginia. You're at Syracuse. Clemson at home. That's 7 of your 10 right there. The other 3 are home games against State, who that's a toss-up. I mean, I think Carolina's better than State, but that's still Carolina and State, and anything can happen. Virginia Tech, who's playing better, that is in Chapel Hill, and Notre Dame, who Carolina will likely be heavily favored against, but they were heavily favored against Georgia Tech. So that's not the order that they play those games, of course, but those are the 10 games left, and Adam, at least 7 of those are toss-ups, in my opinion.
You're going to need a full 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And that includes these next 3, which are tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Duke at home, of course, on Saturday. Clemson at home, who is going to be desperate for a win. They beat Louisville in the midweek. I don't know who they play this weekend, but they need a quality win. And even that Louisville game, I think, ended up being a 6-point game for Clemson. They were up big, but then got it whittled down. And then they're at Miami. And I can't figure Miami out, but I'm guessing that they're going to play well at home against the Tar Heels. And they'll need a good win.
And then your relief from that is going to Syracuse.
Yeah. Jeez, like 2 days later.
Right.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround. So Tar Heels have played very well to this point halfway through ACC play. Anybody in the world would have taken 17-4 and 9-1. But frustrating performance on Tuesday. Again, not the end of the world, but also not what the Tar Heels wanted. And R.J. Davis should have been shooting free throws. That's just a fact. That's just a fact.